Happy Halloween. Leave now while you still can.
Leave now before Master finds you.
Who is that knocking at my door? Who is that knocking at my door? Who is that knocking at my door? Be gone with you.
Hello everyone, today's video I'll be talking about Taste the Blood of Dracula from 1970. This one seems to be a mixed movie. It's either liked or disliked by Hammer fans. Well, for me personally, I didn't hate this movie. It's no masterpiece. I thought it was an okay movie, but I can see why and respect why not everyone might not like this movie for specific reasons. This movie had its highlights and lowlights. Definitely one of the weakest of the Hammer Dracula movies, but it's not one of the worst ones. It had potential, it was not for studio interference, but this one is not as bad as they say it is. This movie has a good opening of where it connects Dracula's risen from the grave, seeing Dracula get stabbed by Paul, and Roy Keener, who you might recognize as Veruca Salt's father from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Weller takes Dracula's cape and dusted blood, has it hidden in its chest. When I first saw this movie, my reaction seeing Roy Keener, who I remember well as Veruca Salt's father from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I kept joking to myself, I want it now, Daddy! I want to be a vampire now! I was expecting Corley to say, I want Dracula's belongings now! It's a small part for him, but it's nice to see his other movies he's done outside of what I'm used to seeing him from watching him in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. He had some funny moments, but he's still not a good person, because he sells Dracula's cape and other belongings to William and his gang. He's a crappy salesman and sold Dracula's remains, not telling William and his friends that this is dangerous. He was your basic stereotypical greedy businessman who was desperate to make money. And it's funny, just thinking this, just like Veruca Salt's father, he was a businessman, but he was not greedy as this character. He was in the nuts business. Ralph Bates, who you might recognize from Horror of Frankenstein, he plays Lord Courtley, a satanic cult leader. His performance in this movie was an upgrade compared to Horror of Frankenstein. His character was very persuasive and pushy. Courtley forces William and his friends to buy Dracula's cape and other belongings for a ritual ceremony to bring back Dracula. Courtley was a crazy sick Satanist sick bastard. Courtley seemed to be a man whore. The women pay him money instead of him paying the women money for sex. When he does the ritual, he cuts his blood in a cup, forces William and his friends to drink the blood. They refuse, then he drinks the blood himself. Then he gets his butt kicked by William and his friends using their canes. I know he was a dick, at the same time, why did they do this? Did they really have a reason to kick the crap out of him? After the ritual, he turns into Dracula. Despite Ralph Bates doing a good job, I just wish he was in this movie more. I took him more serious in this movie than I did in the Horror of Frankenstein. The Dracula resurrection scene was really good. You can tell he was probably going to be the main villain of the movie if the studio did not force the writers to add Dracula in this movie. Come to think of it, Dracula is possibly possessing Courtley's body when you think about it, but I highly doubt that I'm right about that one. The real bad guy in this movie was William. He was a real piece of shit trash dirtbag. He's mean and abusive to his daughter. He forbids her to go out, and yet he goes to bars and whorehouses with his friends. This guy was such a hypocrite. What does he have against his daughter dating Paul? William goes to church, and it just shows that just because he goes to church, that does not mean that he was not a good person. He's an unfaithful, neglectful husband. I hated this character. I wanted him to die. The part when Alice was under Dracula's spell, and she kills her father, I was like, good for you, Alice. He got what he deserved. And I'm like, this is not a big loss. Oh yeah, once again, the main hero of this movie's name is Paul. Just like the last Paul's character in Dracula's Risen from the Grave, Paul's a likable guy, a gentleman. He loves and is very faithful to Alice. Alice is a sweet, kind woman. We feel bad for the way her father treats her. This movie touches upon incest. When she's bitten by Dracula, you root for her to kill her father. It's not a big loss when she kills her dad. It's like no one gives a shit about this guy dying. I don't know why, when I first saw this, I remember it differently. where Dracula kills Alice's father. In a way, this kind of makes Dracula a little bit of an anti-hero, but just only for like 5 minutes. The characters Jeremy and Lucy felt like cliche characters from a slasher movie, with no arc personality, knowing they were going to die. When William and his friends go to the whorehouse, seeing one of the dancers having a snake on her body, this part made me think of From Dusk Till Dawn with Salma Hayek, but I highly doubt that's where Robert Rodriguez took inspiration for that scene. This movie really amps up the nudity, having a group orgy scene. This movie was rated R, and it's the only Hammer Dracula movie to be rated R. William and his friends are in this movie as portrayed as rich jerk stereotypes, except for his friend Secker. He's still a jerk, but he does at least give some money to some poor people. At the same time, he's still an asshole, and not much of a better person. When I was watching this movie, the first half it felt like you can tell was supposed to be a different kind of movie, but then Dracula's thrown at the last minute. Originally, this was not supposed to be a Dracula movie. It was supposed to be some other different kind of film. This movie is another example of studio interference. I read that on IMDb.com that they originally wanted Vincent Price as a fourth member of William Hargood's group. But budget cuts removed this character from the movie. That could have been cool and awesome to have Vincent Price in a Hammer Dracula movie. Again, Christopher Lee is fun to watch as Dracula again. You can tell he's annoyed and agitated for playing Dracula again, and he's not want to be there, but at the same time he does his best. But I hate to say, he's a little bit stiff in this movie. When Dracula comes back, he says, "They have killed my servant. I will get revenge." Dracula's not taking me as a person who would want revenge on a servant he did not care about. But it's possible it's Corley's spirit that's inside Dracula, and he's the one who wants revenge on the people who bought him back. You can possibly say Corley's possessing Dracula, a little taste of Dracula's own medicine, and now he knows what it's like to be controlled, but more of the soul of Corley controlling Dracula. Just like Prince of Darkness, he kills off William's group one by one like a slasher villain. What doesn't make any sense, why does Dracula want to kill them off after they bought him back? He should be thanking them. And once again, Dracula has no use for any of the women in this movie. Even though Alice does what she's told by him, probably the first time Dracula did not want any woman in this movie. Again, just like in the last movie, Dracula does not say much and does not have a lot of dialogue. At this point, I've lost track counting how many words Dracula says in these movies. The movies had themes on when people do something bad and wrong, the past can catch up to them. Paul sets up a plan to stop Dracula at a church. It fails, but he still manages to succeed in destroying Dracula. The weird part is, the way Dracula dies is a little bit odd and weird. It has no logic. He doesn't get stabbed or frozen by ice. He just dies from seeing images of the Holy Cross. How does this kill make any sense? Usually Holy Crosses freak out Dracula, not kill him. Well, maybe a weak movie, but sometimes I do wonder, if you took Dracula out of the equation in this movie, it could have been its own thing, and just been a satanic cult movie. That was my review of Taste the Blood of Dracula. Tomorrow we'll dive into Scars of Dracula. See you tomorrow.